It began in Africa.
Yeah.
We are controlling transmission.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you say?
Yeah. 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 Okay.
Hello and welcome to Afro Space with me, Adetunji Omotola, and my co-host Nyasha Grace. Today we're going to be talking about all things to do with oil and gas. Our focus today and our special guest is the immediate past Minister of Oil, or rather Minister of State for Oil in Nigeria, Dr. Ibe Kachikwu. He was also the former MD of a company called Exxon, as well as ExxonMobil Nigeria. And before that, he was at Texaco as general counsel. And later he rose to become the GMD of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation. And he also became, when he was minister, he was chairman of the board. Thank you so much, former minister, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Let me just correct that I was executive vice chairman of ExxonMobil, not their chairman or MD, just for the records. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
All right. We're privileged to have a conversation with you this afternoon. And I'll start off with the first question, which is in reference to something that already Adetunji touched on when he was reading out your profile, that you recently launched 4 books on one day at the beginning of February this current year. Now, we know you attracted an attendance of over 2,300 people, which in itself is such a formidable and remarkable, feat. Could you tell us about your journey in terms of how you were able to put together 4 books on one single day? I think I did some reading up on you where you talked a story with your granddaughter who even went to tell you, said, "Grandpa, 4 books is too much. We can't read them all." But you achieved this. And tell us your journey to writing and launching 4 books.
Well, I've always felt that experiences in life must be recorded. It helps people who come after you to learn from what you've done and be able to see data with which you work. My approach to writing is usually to focus on existential issues of the moment and not just theoretical books. So everything that happens to me is a potential chapter in a book, whether it is good or bad. So I go in from day one planning that. Like the Vice President, Professor Shivanjo said, I did the first launch of 3 books in 2017. I did another one, I think, in 2018, which were 3 books. And then this was the 4th one. So in some ways, the 4-year ministerial stint gave me a chance to write 10 different books in various aspects of both law and petroleum. I have a strong editorial team whose job is to basically help me with the research. I bring in the whole thought concepts. I direct them to the research materials. They put that all together. I do my initial drafts, they vet before I do the final conclusions and all that. So it makes it quick. I'm also a multitasker. I find that writing one book at a time sometimes can be boring. I'll lose interest halfway. So what I've learned to do over the years from my doctoral work at Harvard is that I begin 2 or 3 type conceptual writings. And if I get tired of one, I move on to the next table and continue the next one until I get inspiration to go to the 3rd one or come back to the 1st. And so that way, your brain isn't locked into one book at a time. So I've done that all my life, and that's it's just become a practice. But it's made easier by the fact that you have a strong editorial team, strong researchers who can help you do some of the seed work. People ask me, how do you do 4 books when the kind of busy schedule a minister has? Well, there's a lot of aeroplane time. There's a lot of weekends. There's lots of so if you use them well, and if your research is well done, you just form a habit of writing.
Okay. Former Minister, you are an author, you are also a legal icon and an oil and gas aficionado. I have also looked at I'm not actually surprised that you're writing prolifically because your background, you've had first class in your Yunsuka days, you've also had a distinction in Nigerian law school, you had a distinction when you did your PhD in Harvard, so you're actually a brilliant scholar. But tell us, how were you able to ambush a sitting president of Nigeria and vice president to attend your book launch a few days ago?
Okay, for my first degree program, I didn't have a first class, I had a 2-1. It was a distinction grade and it was the best in the class. I tend to correct that because you just never know where you're misrepresented. Second is, there are many reasons why I was able to attract both. First of all, it was a formidable exercise. It's not easy getting the president and vice president to an event. Protocol-wise, if not for COVID, you would not even have that happen if it was a live event, because by protocol, both of them wouldn't attend the same event. But over and above that, the president is given over 30, 40 years of his life to petroleum. He was a minister for petroleum. He remains the minister for petroleum. He was over my 4 years of service and still is the minister for petroleum. So he's had a very strong affinity for petroleum. So I think any book that borders on petroleum touches on a topic that he's familiar with and is happy to participate in. Then, of course, one of the books, the petroleum book, was dedicated to him. I hope that helped persuade him to actually, in these hard COVID times, with the kind of mad schedule that he has, be able to find time to do it. But I think he would do that for anybody who is served under him as minister and who puts together a book that in a topic or in an area or subject that he's excited about. The vice president, on the other hand, of course, is a professorial wonk. I mean, he reads and writes literally every day. That's his life. And so he was no surprise that he was the special guest of honor in the launch of my first 3 law books while I was minister, and then had to honor us by coming in to give the closing remarks this time. So with Professor Sibajo, once his book and once his literary, you probably have 2 legs into the room before you even get in. So so that's it. But I think over and above that, I was their staff. They were my bosses. I have left office, and I think that it was a way of encouraging everybody who's worked in government to say we will always be there for you, even if you're not with us anymore.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Now, so just to get into the meat of some of the stuff that you actually have written in your books, particularly in reference to the 10th chapter in one of your books, where you mentioned that 100 small and medium enterprises that should be encouraged to be the future of Nigeria. Can you give us a synopsis of that chapter and the reference to those to 100 small to medium enterprises that should be the future of Nigeria?
I think my feeling when I was minister was that over the years, and I had been in this sector for 30 years, working in the private sector for about 25, and obviously in government for over 4 years, was that once we pursue policies that are meant to obviously drive the economy, we're not focused on the fact that ultimately, unless you bring in local participants and equip them to be able to take over from the multinationals, we may just be wishing something in the sky, because it will not happen. And there are lots of private sector players who are small, very smart, have come out of the oil sectors, are struggling to start on their own, and face a lot of roadblocks. So one of the things I started was what I call Project 100. The Project 100 concept was simply, and I had the capacity to keep creating projects as I worked. That was really something that excited me. And this was just one of the very many. But the Project 100 addressed the fact that if people find 100 small players in the industry, specialized, whether it's in engineering, whether it's in drilling, whether it's in procurement, whether it's in infrastructure, and give them the incentive that they needed to be able to grow a little bit faster, and then give them some geographical growth space. So we said to the oil companies, well, you've done your engineering for so long on small scale type areas of production. Now we have 20 companies that can do it. We're going to insist that you use one of those 20 companies. If they're not good enough, train them, give them the opportunities. Unless we do things like that, it wasn't even going to work. And so when we started that project, which was started in 2018, late 2018, unfortunately, because I wasn't, quite frankly, there to push it to the very end. But we started by interviewing over 5,000 Nigerian companies, We picked up about 25, for example, to start the blueprint. And those 25 were very strong local companies, near 100% participation. And since we focus on how do you get them financed, NCDMB was there to try and provide some financial lines using their $200 million loan lines that they had with the bank. How do we provide them workspace, forcing the multinationals and NNPC to ensure that they give these people a leg in the room to compete favorably and preferentially, in fact. And then 3, how do you help them with training of their core staff so that the standards that are expected in the industry do not go behind? And 4, how do you monitor to ensure that you sort of handhold them as they go through this roughish period of growth? And the reception, the response was amazing. Over 1,000 companies, if I remember well, applied. We selected 25 with a very strenuous, rigorous exercise. The whole idea wasn't that you had to get 100 in one day, but you're going to get a number of 100 at some point in time over the next 2-3 years. And once you get that, then you can expand to 200 companies. The impact would have been made. We began and registered those 25 that qualified. We had a big ceremony in which we recognized them. We began to work with them and NCDMB to see how they get loan facilities, both from them and from the banks. I left after that, and I do hope that the ministry and my colleagues in the ministry and NNPC have continued to follow that up. As part of my right now, I'll be looking to track those 25 companies, see what their growth process are, and that might form probably the seed materials for another book.
Okay. Dr. Kachikwu, you have about 3 decades of experience in the oil industry, from this private sector to the commanding heights of managing the National Petroleum Company. In spite of Nigeria's vast oil reserves and oil production, the country still staggers in the area of refining its oil. Now, we all know about Aliko Dangote's massive refinery project going on in the Lekki area in Lagos. But in your view, why are we still struggling? And also, is Aliko Dangote's refinery a silver bullet?
Well, first, let me say that I was happy that Aliko jumped into this very, I don't know what word to use, but it's a very volatile area of investment. Downstream has very little margins, very expensive infrastructure needs. And for somebody who obviously makes his money a lot with fairly quick shop type industries that have almost a near monopoly, I think that was very Nigerian, very, very nationalistic of him to decide to consider this industry. Ultimately, it should make money. And I visited that plant, I think probably 2 times. And I helped negotiate the gas supply contract with Chevron to ensure that the petrochemical aspect of the plant, which is the first to start off, had adequate gas supply, because without that, you would build infrastructure where there's no raw materials. I would expect they would do the same thing for the crude tanks, to be able to give them crude to be able to do that. So in principle, very good that somebody could do it. And if for nothing, my attitude was, I wanted Nigeria to refine their petroleum products. I didn't care whether it was in the private sector or whether it was in the public sector. Having said that, the direct answer to your question is that government has got to put down its feet on the issue of getting the refineries to work. I will say that during my 4 years, I made every attempt. I went to Saudi Arabia, got some agreement with Saudi Arabia to come work with us on the 2 refineries in Port Harcourt and Warri. I did visit China, got commitments with China to invest in those. We did conduct a bidding exercise in which local and foreign partners put in bids to be able to take over the 3 refineries and do what we call, because there was a lot of labor union challenges in terms of wanting to, whenever you say you want to privatize the refineries, you have a labor union issue. Because labor union will say, look, you haven't even shown us how you can supply us light. So basically, now you want to take over the refineries. There's too much of a nationalistic hold on the refineries, and it's crumbled the refineries over the years. But we did get local participants in conjunction with joint venture partners to come in and bid to be able to run the thing for about 5 to 10 years, put in the requisite money that was going to be invested, roughly about 2.7 billion, if I remember well. And then after a period of 10 years, they would have reactivated, made it profitable, and then we can then sign a partnership agreement on how it's going to be managed, so that way the interest of the government is not ceded away, and that way you can address the issues of the labor union concerns. Unfortunately, of course, I left as GMD to become the minister, and I'm not sure that I carried an NPC as fast as I wanted to go, because I got to a point where I set the timeline of Nigeria stopping importation. But unfortunately, NNPC couldn't deliver on that after I left. One of the challenges you had really is between the ministerial desk and NNPC portfolio. Unless you have a good seamless relationship and integration, what needs to be done? Because you're not the refinery is NNPC. The minister doesn't own an asset. NNPC owns an asset. And so if you can't pull them along to see the profit yield down the track, if they did something, you may be well ahead of your time and nobody's going along with you. So same experience I had. But I think to solve that, we need to have policy consistency. We must say, look, we need to bring in our refineries. And it doesn't matter who occupies the desk after anybody. You've got to focus on delivering that for the president. That's one. Two is that you've got to sit down with NNPC as the owners of the assets to say, you're not the owners of the asset, but you manage it on behalf of the country. And so we all have to work together to make it work. My hope was that our own refineries would have been able to work just about the same time as Dangote's would. So that rather than have a 600,000 barrels capacity refinery, we would have 600 plus 450, which is the 450 is basically the combined crude refining capacity of the other 3 refineries, so 4 refineries owned by the government. So we would have had a net refining capacity over 1 million barrels. If we do that, we become basically the market for the rest of Africa and it's this of some parts of Europe. That hasn't happened. I hope that idea has not been jettisoned. I know that part of the problem was NNPC felt that they would be able to raise their own money and do their own construction and repairs. But that hasn't happened. And we need to look at private sector participation. We need to look at joint venture formula. We need to look at concessioning. We need to deal with the labor issues. But we do need to get those refineries to work. I'm all on board on that.
Mm. All right. Thank you for that very, very elaborate explanation.
Yeah, sure.
My next question would be all right. So my next question,
Can you hear me?
sir, is yes, I can hear you clearly. So my next question for you, sir, is just to probably just broaden the questions a little bit and look at the continent a little bit broader. There are many oil-rich nations in Africa, such as Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, Angola, and obviously Nigeria. But I think the million-dollar question is, how come the nations have not been able to manage their wealth and to be able to develop themselves as the Middle East has done? So why are African countries still poor yet we are resource rich?
Well, I think that the point is first let's correct the premise a little bit. The reality is that when you look at what oil has done for these countries over the last 20, 30 years, it's been a lot. I look at Nigeria in 1960, I look at Nigeria today, you look at how many state capitals have been created, you look at Abuja, you look at infrastructure. Because it is not sufficient, we forget how much, in fact, oil has put into the system, despite all the wastages, despite issues of corruption and all that. So one kudo for oil is that it actually has, much more than any other resource we have, put a lot into developing the country. That's one. Two is that you've got to look at population versus resource. Nigeria is almost 200 million people, pursuing at best highest level of production, 2 million barrels. So really, when you net it out, it's an insignificant production related to the population. Saudi Arabia, on the other hand, is doing about 12 million barrels per day and a population of about 30, 40 million people. So you can see what the dynamics are in terms of development. The other aspect is that most of the Middle Eastern countries are really run by monarchs. And so there's a lot more continuity of policy. If you have leaders who are versatile and who decide to be forward-looking, they're going to be there for a very long time. And so the policies continue to help. For these countries that you mentioned on the other hand, except maybe Equatorial Guinea and a few, what you have is a democracy system that moves people around. And the policies began by one government may not be continued by the next government. So that creates its own difficulties in terms of continuity of development. Whether it's a good or bad thing, I don't know. It depends on where the jury lands. I think it's a good thing to have democracy, but I think it's also important that there should be continuity from one democratic regime to another. Mm-hmm. Then you add on to that the fact that at the end of the day, we've had a lot of corruption in these countries. I mean, let's be honest about it, from country to country. That obviously has taken away a lot of the seeds of advantages. And President Muhammad Buhari has been very focused on trying to work on that. But it's something that not just the president should be focused about, it's something that every Nigerian should be concerned about. How do we ensure that every drop of oil that we sell is sold at the right price, the money is actually returning to the coffers, it is tracked in terms of what development values we get out of it. And over a period of time, some of these things will get better. The third is private sector involvement. There's still a lot of, I went to visit Aramco as a minister when I was negotiating their participation in the refinery. And everybody who works, the key personnel in Aramco, the backbenchers, are foreign nationals. They picked up experts from every part of the world to help them, even though they run the policies. In Nigeria, for example, and I know in Angola, people were so protective of these seats of position. You know, that the effect of that is that some of the best hands that you need are not coming in. If they're Nigerians or Africans, then the private sector, they are very wary of coming to the public sector because of people's experiences. And if they're in fact non-Nigerians, the reception for them is almost negative if they try to get into the national oil companies. But unless you do this, you're not going to be able to compete on the global stage as a world-class company. Saudi Aramco, for example, is able to do its listing in the NYC, SE. For you to do that, you have to have some rigorous benchmarks of performance. And that means that the standards to which you hold these local companies will have to be met. So there are lots of systemic issues, whether they be corruption, whether they be lack of continuity, added to the fact of the disadvantages we have even with these resources, population versus volume, expectations versus reality that have compelled this. I think we need to step back, put together a team that says, not just for Nigeria, but the rest of Africa, what do you want to achieve in 10 years with this? Oil is a vanishing asset. And no matter how much we cradle it for now, in 10 to 15, maybe 20 years at most, you find that most cars in the world are not using any refined product from crude oil anymore. Mm-hmm. And so we need to begin to say, what do we intend to achieve in 10, 15 years from this? Use that to set the best benchmarks and bring in people who can run a company that is transparent, that is visible all over the world, a system that is very self-accounting, efficiencies that reduce cost of production. I mean, I fought the issue of cost of production very vehemently. When I became GMD, I think our benchmark was about $32 per barrel. Of course, when oil therefore falls below 40, we're dead. And so I began to push to try and create what I call it efficiencies between oil companies. For the oil companies, if you don't police them, they're ready to, as long as oil price is high, they're ready to produce at the highest cost advantage. It's good for them. And so I began to insist that we needed to bring down the price to $15 a barrel. I think before I left, working with the last GMD, we had moved cost of producing oil in Nigeria to somewhere around the $22, $23 per barrel cost. And in fact, one or two companies that achieved $15 a barrel. The benchmark was about $10 a barrel. Saudi Arabia is shooting for $6 a barrel. So that way, no matter what happens, you can survive. So a lot of work still needs to be done. It's sad that we've done this for 30, 40 years, and we just haven't gotten the efficiency levels that we need. But we can't give up. We've got to continue.
Yeah. So, Doc, the last question that we want to pose to you is about the current situation in Nigeria, the petroleum, what I call the almighty petroleum industry bill, which is going to repeal all previous legislation that has to do with the oil industry. It's an omnibus legislation, and it talks about scrapping the elephant in the room, the national corporation, the National Oil Corporation, NNPC, and replace it with almost a similar thing, but now a company rather than a corporation. What is your view, given that this bill has been sitting in the backyard for about 20 years? Do you think that is going to create the much needed change? And also, how do you think it will impact the host communities who said they're going to levy about 10% on the revenue that accrues from oil?
You're probably talking to an individual who is already a partial commentator on this, because I did work with the last Senate in terms of this, the PIB bill that went to Mr. President. I am waiting to see the new one, to see the same bill, but with some amendments, I guess. But I wanted to see what is eventually passed by the Assembly, so that I can compare those. You know that I did a book, one of the books that I did during my time was PIB Getting to the Yes, trying to lead them to where they should be. So I'm hoping I can find enough materials to write another one, which is PIB, the yes versus the reality. But so I'm a bit partial in this. But I believe in PIB. I think there's been lots of mundane laws here and there scattered all over the place, from which a prospector would have to sift through to find out what the relevant requirements are. This becomes like a code comprising all the key sectors of issues of interest that one needs to look at. So I'm looking forward to that. I think it will help. The lack of passage over nearly 12 years, 13 years now, has created a lot of docility in the sector. People are not certain what is coming. So investments have basically been stagnant. Nobody wants to do an investment. An environment, is in a changing platform. So if you take a statistical analysis of oil sector investment over the last 10 years, you see that it's just been getting a south bend curve as opposed to a northward movement. And that's because of a lot of uncertainty. In terms of how it's going to affect the national oil company, it's going to be for good. I champion the fact that there was a need. The corporation is big, it's useful, but it needs to be structured in such a way that it will capture every benefit that should come. And so I think some of the pushes are to restructure it, pick up the financial earning arm, which is, say, like the current NAPIMS, make it into a petroleum company of its own right, and so it passes up all the money straight into the federation account without deductions. And then NNPC, as will be left, will then be able to manage all its fairly huge resource refineries, its areas of operations in NPDC and the rest, and its new oil explorations up in the north, and then be able to run as a company competing with the likes of Mobil and the rest. There's really no reason. Our dream had been before I left that we're going to run NNPC from the 40,000 barrels a day that I met, and above the 150,000 barrels a day when I left. So somewhere in the neighborhood of 500,000 barrels, given the huge assets that they have assigned to them. And so they can compete with any of the players, bring in the best energy, best hands, just like Aramco does, and compete. So it will have enough to do. People worry about, you're trying to cannibalize NNPC. No, of course not. You're trying to make it more efficient. You're trying to create other structures that will enable the corporation run well, enable oil business be managed. The host community issue will continue to be a lingering issue. It is something that the assembly will need to look at. But I think that unless there's those community issues, you find that you're just pushing the can forward. It's going to be a lingering problem. Now, will PIB solve all the host community issues? Certainly not. Some positive parameters in terms of which direction we should be going. So I am very mindful. I'm very hopeful that PIB will usher in a very good regime. The tenures, the licensing requirements, the tenures for OMLs and all that stuff, the investment incentives for gas and all that. So hopefully, we should be able to open up our industry in a way that is certain, it's predictable, and hopefully it's profitable for every player.
All right,
Thank you very much,
Minister. Just the last question. If you could give us a prediction, how much more time do you think Nigeria needs to achieve these efficiencies so that we see the best productivity in the oil and gas industry in Nigeria?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I think you're asking how long will it take for the efficiencies to bear fruit?
Correct.
Projection in terms of time. It is a factor of so many things. It depends on how consistent, like I said, the policies remain, who is driving it, and the skill set of those who are driving it. But I think that if you continue on the pedestrian that we set and just club on it very firmly, you should be able to, with PIB, to achieve efficiency in 2 to 3 years. We achieved a lot of efficiency in 2.5 years while one was there. For example, the cost of production went down. Utilization of gas was very focused on. Staffing issues were dealt with. NFS, in fact, became profitable in May of 2016, which was a major achievement for such a huge company. So you could actually, and the first thing we did was to do what we called 20 fixes. 20 fixes addressed while I was GMD. What are the 20 things you needed to do to turn the country from being, the company, from being a loss-making concern to a profit-making concern? And we have various teams on that. And then, of course, after that, we launched the 7 big wins. Things flowing from that will now enable you to reap the benefits. So if you have your leg on the foot on the pedal rightly, you have people who have the experience to do it, you have consistency in government, you have a very committed leader to lead this sector, you will be able to achieve efficiencies in 3 to 4 years.
All
Our
right.
projection
Okay.
will show that
Sorry,
you should
sir. Doc,
benchmark a
unfortunately,
quotation
we've
in
run out of
New York
time.
Stock.
Sorry, Doc. I'm sorry to cut in there, but we've run out of time and we'll shortly be cut off. But thank you so much for coming and giving us those insights and just sharing your knowledge with us. We appreciate your time. From me, Nyasha Grace, I will say my goodbye in Shona from Zimbabwe, and that is Sarai Shakanaga.
And from me, Adetunji Omotola, it's Oda Segove.
It began in Africa.